I was young once, and I had a best friend named Jack. We spent almost all our time together, playing sports, riding bikes, and talking about everything. Jack was more than just a friend, he was like a brother to me. We were inseparable, always promising that we would stay friends forever. But then, something terrible happened. One day, Jack and I were driving in my father's car, laughing and joking as we always did. Out of nowhere, another car appeared. Jack tried to stop, but he couldn't. The crash was sudden and brutal. My father was sitting in the front seat, and he was badly hurt. We rushed him to the hospital, praying he would be okay, but he didn't survive. A few days later, he was gone. I was filled with anger at the world, at fate, but most of all, at Jack. I blamed him for everything. If he hadn't been driving, my father would still be alive. The pain was unbearable, and I wanted him to feel it too. I avoided him for weeks. Every time I saw him, all I could think about was that day, and my heart ached even more. Jack tried to talk to me, but I couldn't bring myself to face him. My anger clouded everything. One day, Jack came to my house. His eyes were filled with tears, and guilt was written all over his face. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "It was an accident. I never meant for this to happen. Please forgive me." His words broke something inside me. I was still angry, but in that moment, I saw his pain, his deep sorrow. He was suffering too. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't the only one hurting. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Jack," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You took my father from me." Jack stepped closer, his hands trembling. "I know," he said softly. "I wish I could take it all back. I would do anything to change what happened." I looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, the anger began to fade. The sadness was still there, but a part of me wanted to heal. I didn't want to carry this pain forever. I wanted to move forward, but I didn't know how. For the next few days, I thought about everything, about my father, our memories, and the love he had given me. But I also thought about Jack, my best friend, who had been there for me through everything. Despite the accident, he never left. He was still by my side. I realized that Jack needed my forgiveness just as much as I needed to let go of my anger. One afternoon, I decided it was time to talk to him. I found him sitting by the river, lost in thought. Without a word, I walked over and sat down beside him. At first, he didn't look up, but when he finally did, his face softened. "Jack," I said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking. It wasn't your fault. It was an accident. I don't want to live with this anger anymore." Jack's eyes filled with tears. He shook his head and whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm so grateful you are giving it to me." I took a deep breath. "You are my best friend, Jack. I can't let this destroy our friendship. I forgive you." The days that followed were quiet. Jack and I spent more time together, not saying much but simply being there for each other. At first, it felt strange, like something between us had changed. But slowly, I started to feel like myself again. The anger was gone, and though the pain still lingered, it no longer controlled me. Together, we worked to rebuild not just our friendship, but our lives. We spent hours walking through the fields, talking about the past and remembering the good times with my father. Jack never tried to forget what had happened, but he was determined to make things right. He promised that no matter what, he would always be there for me. One afternoon, as we sat by the river again, Jack turned to me. "I'm sorry for everything," he said. "I never meant for things to go this way. I wish I could change it." "I know, Jack," I replied. "But it's done now. We have to live with it, and so do you. The important thing is that we are still here, we are still friends." For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it no longer weighed me down. I could finally breathe without feeling like something heavy was crushing my chest. Forgiveness was difficult, but it was the only way forward. That day, we made a promise to always be there for each other, no matter what life threw our way. Our friendship had been tested, but it had survived. And we both knew that it was worth more than any past mistake. Years passed, and life moved on. Jack and I remained close friends, but our lives took different paths. He got married and had children, while I stayed single, focusing on my work and living quietly. Sometimes, I thought back to those dark days when anger consumed me. It all seemed so distant now, like a bad dream. I couldn't believe how much of my life I had wasted holding on to my resentment. Life. The village had always been our home, and despite everything we had been through, it remained the same, a place of comfort, memories, and second chances. I thought back to all the years I had spent consumed by grief and resentment, realizing how much energy I had wasted on something I could never change. But now, everything felt different. Holding on to anger had only hurt me, not Jack. Letting go had set me free. One day, Jack invited me over to his house. His children were busy playing inside, their laughter filling the air. We sat on the porch, just like we used to when we were younger. We talked about old times, our families, and how much our lives had changed. As the sun began to set, Jack looked at me and said, "I'm really glad we've stayed friends all these years. I never thought I could fix what happened, but I think we both did." "I think so too," I said with a smile. "We didn't just fix it, we learned from it. And we've both become better because of it." For a moment, we sat in silence, watching his children play. It was a peaceful moment, a moment of understanding and acceptance. We had been through so much together, and now we had finally found peace with the past. It wasn't just forgiveness that healed us, it was the time we spent together, the support we gave each other, and the bond we had always shared. We were no longer defined by the pain of our past but by how we had grown from it. As I sat there, watching Jack's children run and laugh, I felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, I realized that the anger I had carried for so long had completely disappeared. It was a relief to know that I no longer felt the need for revenge or resentment. I was free. Jack had built a beautiful life for himself. He was a proud father, and I could see the happiness in his eyes when he talked about his family. His children, full of energy and curiosity, reminded me of the way we used to be, young, fearless, and full of dreams. Seeing him so happy made me realize how far we had both come, how we had survived the hardest of times, and how we had found a way forward. The most important lesson I had learned was that forgiveness wasn't just for the person who had hurt you, it was for yourself. Forgiving Jack for what had happened all those years ago had lifted a weight from my heart. It allowed me to move on, to enjoy life again, and to find happiness in the present. One day, Jack and I took a walk through the village. The streets were quiet, the air fresh, and the world around us felt calm. We talked about everything and nothing, just as we always had. As we walked, I couldn't help but think about all the time we had lost to anger and pain. "We should have done this sooner," I said, glancing at Jack. "I agree," he replied with a smile. "But we are here now, and that's what matters." We stopped and looked at the village before us. It was small, peaceful, and full of life. It was home. And as I stood there beside my best friend, I knew that no matter what the future held, we had finally found our way back to each other. As I stood there, surrounded by the memories of our village, I realized that it wasn't just the place that had changed, it was us. We had both grown, learned, and healed. I was no longer the angry young man who had once been consumed by the desire for revenge. Instead, I was someone who had found peace through forgiveness and understanding. And as I looked at my old friend, I knew that we had both learned how to live with the past, and, more importantly, how to live with each other. Years passed, and the painful memories of that time slowly faded. Jack and I grew older, but we never lost the bond that had once been broken. We spent our days sitting together, reminiscing about life, our families, and the lessons we had learned along the way. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden, I turned to Jack with a smile. "I never thought we would get to this point," I admitted. "I thought we would always be stuck in the past." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I thought the same. But you were right to forgive me. In the end, it was the only way to heal." At that moment, I understood that forgiveness had given us both a second chance, not just at friendship, but at life itself. It had allowed us to create new memories, ones that we never thought possible in the aftermath of our pain. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the village, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the years we had spent together, for the peace we had found, and for the lessons we had learned. Life had taken us on a journey filled with challenges, but it had also brought us closer. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by the joy of knowing that we had both changed for the better. And as I sat there with my old friend, I knew that this chapter of my life, one filled with forgiveness, healing, and peace, was a chapter one would treasure forever.